I hadn't planned on coming back to Maple Creek that summer. I was supposed to be in Austin, working a part-time gig with a startup, maybe crashing with some college friends, figuring out my next step. But the job fell through last minute, and the lease on my campus apartment ended 2 weeks too soon. So I packed what little I had, loaded up my beat-up Honda, and made the quiet drive back to the neighborhood I thought I'd outgrown. My mom was out of town visiting my aunt in Florida, which meant I had the house to myself. The quiet hit differently now, not like freedom, but like something unshaped, like I was floating in a life that hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. On my second day home, I ran into Jake, my old best friend from high school. We hadn't talked much since graduation, just the occasional like on Instagram or a happy birthday message. But he waved me down while I was walking through the old park trail, the same one we used to bike through like we were invincible. "Dude, no way!" He grinned, jogged up, and clapped me on the back. "What are you doing here?" I told him the short version, job fizzled, back for a bit, maybe the summer. He grinned. "Well, you're coming by tonight. My mom's making dinner. She'll flip when she sees you." I almost said no. I really did. But there was something in how he said it, easy, familiar. And I hadn't had a home-cooked meal in weeks. So I said sure. That night, I pulled into their driveway just before 7. The house looked the same, though the porch light was warmer than I remembered, softer. The front door opened before I even knocked. And there she was, Lauren, Jake's mom. She was wearing a soft blue blouse and jeans, barefoot on the hardwood floor, a dish towel slung over her shoulder. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, a few strands of silver catching the hallway light. She looked tired, maybe, but not in a bad way. In the way that said she'd seen a lot lately. Survived it. "Is that?" she began, then smiled. "Oh my God. Look at you." I smiled awkwardly. "Hi, Mrs. Adams." She stepped forward and wrapped me in a hug before I could finish the sentence. "You don't have to call me that anymore. God, how long has it been? You were what, 17 last time I saw you?" 18, I said, pulling back. "Right before graduation." "Well, come in. Don't just stand there." Inside, the house smelled like roasted garlic and something buttery, the kind of comfort that made your shoulders drop without realizing it. Jake was already at the table, scrolling through his phone and pretending not to be starving. He looked up and grinned. "You remember where the forks are." Dinner was easy. Pasta, a tossed salad, iced tea in mason jars. We joked about high school, about the time Jake tried to skateboard off the roof, about a failed camping trip that ended with raccoons stealing our Pop-Tarts. But beneath all of it, I kept catching Lauren's glances. Not intense, not weird, just longer than I expected. At one point, Jake got up to take a call outside. Something about his girlfriend and car trouble. I stayed behind, stacking plates, offering to help clear the table. "You don't have to," Lauren said, brushing her hand lightly against mine as she reached for a dish. "I don't mind," I replied. We worked in silence for a bit. She handed me a towel. I dried. "You seem different," she said after a moment. "Quieter, older. I guess college does that." She looked at me thoughtfully. "No, life does that." Our eyes met for just a second too long. Then she smiled faintly and turned back to the sink. "I'm glad you're here. Jake's missed having someone around who doesn't drive him crazy." "He hasn't changed much," I joked. "No, but everything else has." She didn't explain, and I didn't press. Later, as I was leaving, she followed me to the door. The porch light behind her made the strands in her hair glow gold. "You're welcome here any time," she said. "Really? Thanks," I said. "Dinner was amazing." She smiled, then added quietly, "It was nice to have someone listen again." I paused. "Any time." We held each other's gaze just a heartbeat longer than necessary. Then I stepped off the porch into the warm summer night. As I walked back to my car, I didn't feel like the same guy who drove into town 2 days ago. Something had shifted, small, subtle, but unmistakable. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew it had started in her kitchen, and I had a feeling it wouldn't be the last time I'd stand there. The next time I saw her, it wasn't planned. It was the following Wednesday around noon. I'd just come out of the local grocery store with a box of cereal and 2 cans of cold brew, trying to convince myself it counted as lunch, when I spotted her in the parking lot. Lauren stood beside her car, the trunk open, a bag of potatoes dangling halfway off the edge. She was wearing black leggings and an oversized linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, hair in a loose bun. There was a crease between her brows as she tried to wrestle a case of water bottles into the trunk. Without thinking, I crossed the lot. "Hey, need a hand?" She turned at the sound of my voice, and for a moment her face lit up, soft and surprised, like I'd appeared out of nowhere. "Oh, thank God. This thing weighs more than it should." I grabbed the water from her and slid it into the trunk. She stepped aside and smiled. "I'm starting to think you show up when I need you most." I chuckled. "Just lucky timing. You always were good at that." We stood there for a second in the heat. She wiped her hands on her shirt and glanced down at my grocery bag. "That's your lunch. Don't judge." She laughed. "I won't. But how about you swing by the house? I made too much pasta salad." Again, I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, I did. But something about her tone made it feel more like an invitation than a favor. "Sure," I said. "Let me follow you?" She nodded and slid into her car. I climbed into mine, heart thudding harder than it had any right to. The kitchen was cooler than outside, the air conditioner humming softly. Lauren moved around the room with a rhythm that felt familiar now. Barefoot on the tile, humming something under her breath, pouring lemonade into 2 glasses without asking. "Sit," she said, nodding toward the island. "I'll get plates." We ate at the counter, sunlight filtering through the blinds in golden lines. The pasta salad was better than anything I'd eaten all week. Chilled penne with olives, roasted peppers, feta, a hint of lemon. "So," she said, halfway through her second bite, "what are you doing with your time now that you're back in town?" I shrugged. "Mostly nothing. Catching up on sleep. Helping my mom clear out the garage. Thinking a lot. Dangerous pastime," she said with a half smile. "I don't mind the quiet. Sometimes I think it's the only place I hear myself clearly." Her expression softened. "I get that," she said. "After the divorce, the silence was deafening. Then after a while, it became the only thing I trusted." I paused, not wanting to pry but not wanting to dodge it either. "Was it bad?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "Not at first. Just slow. Like watching a photo fade. You don't notice it day to day. But one morning you wake up and realize you don't recognize the frame anymore." I didn't speak. I just let her keep going if she wanted to. "I think what scared me most," she added, "wasn't the idea of being alone. It was the realization that I'd already been alone for a long time." The words hung there, not heavy, not dramatic, just real. She caught my eye again. "You know what I miss most?" "What?" "Being seen. Not just looked at, really seen. I didn't know what to say to that, but I didn't break eye contact either. She gave a faint, almost self-deprecating smile. Sorry. That came out more intense than I meant it to. No, I said slowly. It didn't. We sat in silence for a while, finishing our food. She stood to rinse her dish, and I followed, placing mine in the sink beside hers. Thanks for lunch, I said. Any time, she replied. Really? As I turned to leave, she paused and said, Hey, wait. I stopped at the door. She stepped closer, wiping her hands on a towel. Her voice was quieter now. It's nice having someone around who listens. I didn't realize how much I missed that. I nodded, unsure if I should say something more. I didn't want to ruin the simplicity of that moment by over-explaining it. But as I turned the doorknob, she said one more thing. You make me feel like myself again. It was the kind of sentence that lingers, the kind you don't answer, the kind that wraps itself around your ribs and stays there. I drove home without turning the radio on. That Friday, I passed by her house on a walk. It wasn't intentional, not at first. But something about the way the late afternoon light hit the sidewalk made me slow down as I neared her porch. And there she was, sitting on the steps, a glass of wine in her hand, one knee pulled to her chest, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked up and smiled. Hey, stranger. Hey, you're out walking? Trying to get out of my own head. She patted the step beside her. You want company or more head noise? I didn't hesitate. I sat. The wine was sweet and cold. She poured me a glass without asking. For a while we said nothing. Just watched the sun dip lower across the roofs. Listened to the cicadas begin their evening chorus. I used to sit out here after Jake went to bed, she said. Glass of wine, quiet porch. Pretend the world didn't need me for a minute. And now, she looked at me. Her eyes weren't sad, just honest. Now it feels like the world forgot I'm here. I wanted to say something, anything. Instead, I just reached over and touched her hand. She didn't pull away. The warmth of her fingers pressed lightly against mine. Not a grasp, not a signal, just presence. It was the kind of touch that said, you're not invisible. And in that moment, I realized something else. Neither was I. It was the rain that brought me back to her door. The storm rolled in unexpectedly that Saturday evening, just after sunset. The sky went from golden to gunmetal in minutes, and by the time I made it to my porch, the streets were already slick with water. I watched the wind move through the trees like breath through lungs, restless and alive. Something about it stirred me. Not anxiety, not urgency, but something quieter. Loneliness, maybe, the kind you don't name out loud. My phone buzzed. Lauren, if you're not busy and don't mind a little thunder, I've got too much tea and nothing to do with it. I stared at the message longer than I needed to. Then I grabbed my hoodie, shoved it on, and stepped into the night. Her porch light was on. The same soft glow as before, casting warm yellow across the rain-slicked steps. She opened the door before I knocked. Hey, she said, brushing damp hair behind her ear. Come in. I stepped inside, shaking the rain off my sleeves. The house smelled like chamomile and ginger, with something sweeter underneath, maybe vanilla or just her. She wore a long cream-colored cardigan over a simple t-shirt and leggings. Barefoot again. She always seemed more herself like that. Unguarded, quiet, grounded. Still like peppermint? She asked, already heading toward the kitchen. Always. She poured steaming water into 2 mugs, set them on the island, and nodded toward the couch. Come sit. It's loud tonight. The windows rattled softly as we settled in. The rain came down harder now, tapping like fingers against the glass. The living room was dim, lit only by a small lamp in the corner and the occasional flash of lightning. We sat with our mugs in hand, shoulders angled slightly toward each other. A low folk song playing from the speaker on the bookshelf. After a few sips, she exhaled slowly. I never minded storms when I was younger. They made the world feel smaller, like everything outside the house could wait. I nodded, tracing the rim of my mug with a thumb. I think I like the way they pause everything. She turned to look at me. You're a quiet person, but not empty. I noticed that. You see more than most people. People like me learn how to read rooms. What do you mean? She smiled, but it was faint. When you spend years trying to keep the peace in a house that doesn't want to hold itself together, you either learn to listen or you drown. She didn't say it with bitterness, just clarity, like someone sorting through a memory they no longer flinched at. I sat with that for a moment. Then, softly, was it like that? The marriage? She nodded once, quiet, until it wasn't. Then it was too loud to fix. The rain thundered harder for a beat, like the sky answered for her. I'm sorry. She looked at me again, her expression unreadable. I'm not anymore. We didn't speak for a while after that. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was weighty, like something was being felt that didn't need words. At some point, she stood and walked over to the window, watching the rain sheet down in silver waves. I used to think if I could just keep everything clean, everything organized, everything perfect, it would keep the bad parts out. Her voice was softer now. But it doesn't work that way. You can't vacuum silence. You can't scrub away the feeling of being invisible. I stood too, moved beside her, not too close, just enough to see her reflection in the glass. You're not invisible. She turned her head slowly. You always say that like you mean it. I do. We stood like that for a moment, eye to eye, breath to breath. Then she said, almost too quiet to hear, sometimes I forget what it feels like to be seen, and not just for what I used to be. I reached for her hand. She didn't flinch. Her fingers laced with mine naturally, like they'd done it before in another life. Her skin was warm, steady. I don't see who you were, I said. I see who's standing right here. Her eyes didn't leave mine. A flash of lightning lit the room, casting pale silver across her face. She let out a quiet breath. Come sit with me. We moved back to the couch, our hands still loosely joined. She curled her legs beneath her and turned to face me more fully, one shoulder leaning against the cushions. I mirrored her, knees almost touching. I don't know what this is, she said honestly, and I'm not trying to make it into something it's not. I know. I'm not looking for anything messy, or dangerous, or stupid. I'm not here for that. She looked down at our hands. Then why are you here? Because, I said carefully, you make me feel awake. Her breath caught slightly, and for the first time that night, she let her shoulders drop. I haven't felt alive in a long time, she whispered. Until lately. We were so close now, close enough to hear her inhale, to feel the warmth of her across the short space between us. Her fingers brushed my knee. Not an accident. She looked up at me, her voice steady. I just don't want to feel invisible anymore. You're not. That was all I said. But it was enough. She leaned in slowly, not rushed, not desperate. just drawn. And when our foreheads touched, she closed her eyes for a moment like she needed to breathe something in before crossing whatever line we were about to cross. Then her lips found mine. The kiss was soft, careful. No hunger, no claiming, just presence. Two people who didn't know what they were, but who knew what they weren't. Alone. When we pulled apart, she stayed close, her forehead against mine, her hand still on my leg. "I don't know what comes next," she said. "We don't have to know." She nodded, eyes still closed. "I just needed to feel something honest." "You did." She rested her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped an arm around her. We sat like that while the storm moved through town. Steady, alive, quiet. Outside, the sky slowly began to clear. But inside, something had just begun. The next morning was still. The rain had moved on, leaving the streets rinsed and quiet. The world looked washed, like everything had been softened overnight. The sky pale, the light gentle through the curtains in Lauren's living room. I woke on the couch, my head tilted back, a throw blanket across my chest I didn't remember grabbing. But she wasn't in the room. I sat up slowly, the hum of the ceiling fan above whispering through the silence. For a moment, I wondered if last night had happened the way I remembered. The touch of her hand, the weight of her leaning into me, the kiss that didn't feel like an accident. Then I heard movement in the kitchen. I stood, quietly folding the blanket, and walked toward the soft clinking of dishes. Lauren stood at the counter, barefoot again, in a long cream-colored sweater and a loose tank top. Her hair was tied back in a messy knot, a few wisps framing her face. She looked calm, real. She turned when she heard me and smiled. "Morning." "Hey, I didn't want to wake you. I think your couch was too comfortable." She chuckled. "It's deceptively cozy." She poured me a cup of coffee without asking and handed it over. Her fingers brushed mine for just a second. Neither of us said anything about it. We drank in quiet for a few minutes, the two of us leaning against opposite sides of the kitchen. No tension, no awkwardness, just stillness, the kind that made everything else slow down. "I was going to make breakfast," she said eventually. "Eggs, toast, nothing fancy. I'll help." She looked at me across the mug. "You really don't have to." "I want to." Something in her eyes shifted then, not doubt but wait. A pause before she let herself believe it. We moved through the kitchen like we had before, passing ingredients, reaching into drawers, brushing shoulders. But everything was slower this time, more aware. Halfway through cracking the eggs, she looked over and said softly, "Last night didn't feel wrong." "No," I agreed. "It didn't." She nodded, more to herself than to me. "I just keep waiting for the guilt to show up." "Did it?" She took a breath. "No, that was enough." We ate at the kitchen island again, like nothing had changed, except everything had. And after we finished, she didn't rush to clean up. Instead, she stayed seated, fingers tracing the edge of her plate, eyes lost in thought. "I don't do things like that," she said suddenly. "I mean, I don't invite people in like that. Not anymore. I didn't come here expecting anything." "I know," she said, meeting my gaze. "That's why it mattered." Silence again. But it wasn't avoidance. It was space, space to let things settle. "I forgot how it feels," she continued, "to be wanted, not because someone needs something, not because I'm filling a role, just to be seen, for who I actually am." I set my coffee down. "You never stopped being worth seeing." Her eyes glistened slightly, but she blinked the tears back and gave a soft laugh. You always knew the right thing to say. I don't plan it, I said. I just mean it. She stared at me for a second too long. Then she stood and reached for the dishes. I followed even though she told me not to. The rest of the day passed like a quiet current. She had errands to run, I had nowhere to be. I offered to come with her, partly to help, partly because I didn't want to walk away just yet. We drove to the farmer's market in her car, music playing low, windows cracked. She picked out tomatoes and fresh bread, asked my opinion on different kinds of jam. It was so mundane, so ordinary, and yet it felt like the most intimate thing in the world, like being invited into a rhythm most people never got to see. When we got back, she put on a record, something old, soulful, full of violins and quiet piano chords. We ate sandwiches in the backyard. She talked about her garden plans. I told her about my failed internship. Neither of us said what we were really thinking, but it was there, underneath every glance, every shared laugh. By the time the sun began to dip, the sky turned peach and lavender, and she lit a candle on the patio table. We sat in its flickering glow, our drinks in hand, silence stretching out again, this time more deliberate. You leave in August? She asked. Probably, unless something changes. I used to think I'd never leave Maple Creek. And now, she smiled faintly. Sometimes I wonder what's left for me here. You don't have to stay just because it's familiar. Familiar is safe. So is numb. Her eyes flicked toward me. How did you get so old, so fast? I think I always was, I said. Just didn't know what to do with it before. She reached out then, just barely, her fingertips brushing the back of my hand on the table. Her touch was light, tentative, but she didn't pull away. I'm scared of wanting something again, she said. Scared of trusting it. I'm not here to break anything. I know, she whispered. The wind stirred through the trees, leaves rustling like breath. I used to sit out here with a glass of wine and pretend the quiet meant peace, she added. But I know better now. What does it mean? Loneliness with a good disguise. I turned my hand over, letting her fingers slide into mine. You're not alone anymore, I said. She looked at me like I was the only thing real in the room. Then she said it again, the words she'd hinted at since this began. You made me feel alive again. And she meant it. Not dramatically, not with desperation, but with the quiet honesty of someone who hadn't said it aloud before. I didn't answer right away. I just held her hand. That was the answer. It was the last Sunday in July. The air carried that late summer stillness, the kind that feels stretched thin and heavy, like time is holding its breath. The sidewalks shimmered faintly in the afternoon heat, and even the wind seemed to move slower than usual. I hadn't planned on going to her house that day, but I ended up there anyway. I stood outside her gate for a full minute before knocking. I could hear soft music playing inside. Something mellow, maybe Nora Jones or a similar voice that felt like warm shadows and half sentences. Then the door opened. Lauren stood there in a light gray dress that barely brushed her knees, her hair loosely curled, falling naturally around her shoulders. She looked at me with something unreadable in her eyes. Not surprise, not relief. Something deeper, like she already knew I was coming. Hey, I said. Hey. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she stepped aside. Inside, the house smelled faintly of citrus and fresh linen. She'd opened the windows, letting the breeze flow through, and a single candle burned low on the dining table. The space felt lived in, but soft, like it had finally settled into itself again. "I wasn't sure I'd see you today," she said, her voice gentle. "I wasn't either." We stood near the counter in silence, the kind that felt full rather than awkward. Then she added, "Jake called this morning. He'll be back in town next week." I nodded slowly. "And I'll be leaving soon after." I figured. We didn't say it, but we both felt the ticking clock. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything." She looked down at the table for a moment, like she was organizing her thoughts. "Did this mean something to you? Not just the moments, but all of it?" I met her eyes without hesitation. "Yes, all of it." She looked relieved and sad. "And something else, something like peace." "I didn't expect you," she said quietly. "Not this summer. Not in this life." "Neither did I." She reached for her mug, took a small sip, then set it back down. "After the divorce," she said, "I told myself I was done chasing connection, that I could live without being seen, really seen, and still be okay." She paused. "But then you walked into my kitchen and looked at me like I was still alive." "You are." She gave a soft, breathy laugh. "I didn't feel it until you." That hit harder than I expected, because it was beautiful and terrifying and honest. I moved closer, gently brushing my fingers against her arm. "You gave me something too," I said. "What's that?" "The space to feel real. To not pretend I know who I'm supposed to be." She turned to face me fully then. Her expression was steady, but her eyes brimmed with something she wasn't trying to hide. "I don't know where this leaves us," she said. "I don't expect anything. I don't even know if we'll talk a month from now. But I need you to know. You changed something in me." My throat tightened. "You changed something in me too." She stepped into me, slowly, like she was still afraid the world might snap shut if she moved too fast. Her hand touched the side of my face, thumb resting lightly at my jaw. "I'm not the same woman I was a month ago," she whispered. I leaned into her hand. "That's not a bad thing." "No, it's not." We stayed like that for a while. Close, quiet, hearts beating out what words couldn't. Eventually, I pulled back just slightly. "I should go soon. Start packing. There's not much time left." She nodded, her hand falling slowly away. "I know." But neither of us moved. "You'll do great wherever you go," she said. "That calm of yours, it's rare. I'll come back, if you want me to." She smiled but didn't answer. Instead, she walked over to the window and stared out at the soft sway of trees in the wind. The light hit her hair just right, like it always seemed to. Then she turned back to me. "If you ever feel like the world's too loud again," she said, "this house has room. I'll remember that." She walked me to the door. But before I stepped out, she reached for my hand one last time and held it firmly. "You made me feel alive again," she said. "I'm glad," I said. "Because you are." Our eyes met, and there it was, not a promise, not a plan, but something just as strong. Understanding. She let go of my hand. I stepped down onto the porch, and the door closed gently behind me, not as an ending, but as a pause. Because what we found that summer wasn't about forever. It was about being fully, deeply, honestly, even just for a moment. And sometimes a moment is enough.